Looks like we're getting ready to roll here. I think the live stream is cooking and we are good to go. All right, Hoosier Nation. Week 2 is in the books and Indiana took care of business. No one asked them to save the world against the Idaho Vandals, but the Hoosiers, in front of a boisterous home crowd, recorded their first win of the season in the opener. We're going to recap that game quickly and then dive in to this juicy, highly anticipated heavyweight matchup in Bloomington, Indiana, that will take place on Saturday against number 8 Cincinnati, right here on episode 217 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are your official podcast of Indiana HQ. Joining me tonight is Indiana HQ contributor Jevan McCoskey. We're also going to have my normal co-host Matt Lukens jump on in a few minutes here. You'll hear him pop his head in this podcast in a little bit. Jevan, I wanted to start with this. You were at the game, covering the game for Indiana HQ on Saturday. The Hoosiers came away with a 56-14 win over Idaho. I don't know how much you want to talk about the game. What I want to talk about is that atmosphere, is that environment. What was it like in Bloomington? Communicated to Hoosier Nation, the part of Hoosier Nation that was unable to be at Memorial Stadium last weekend.
Yeah, so the gates opened at 6 o'clock. It was a 7:30 kickoff time. And I think by 6:50, maybe 7 o'clock, the student section was full. And so that's something that you always love to see, right? And especially something that early for a game that, Indiana was favored by 31.5 points. Let's be honest. Usually this game is not going to be one that you see a packed Memorial Stadium, but that is exactly what you got. Memorial Stadium was packed. I know Tom Allen talks about pack the Rock, and the Rock was packed for sure. I mean, I don't know if you follow Indiana HQ, maybe you saw this, but I mean, a bleacher was broken in the student section, for crying out loud. I mean, they came and Penick talked about it. Tom Allen talked about it. The energy was brought from pregame warmups until about halftime. Halftime it started to die out a little bit as these games kind of go. But I think what made the atmosphere was the play on the field. So you say you don't really want to don't want to talk about the game, but I think what made the atmosphere was the play on the field. I mean, 2 special teams touchdowns with a blocked punt return for a touchdown, and the punt itself returned for a touchdown by DJ Matthews. It was a good game to be at. It was good to see a bounce back win like that after the game that we saw in Iowa. But it was for sure just sitting up in the press box, looking, left to right. You could do that left to right, whole thing, panorama view, and see sea of fans. It was great.
Yeah, the Hoosiers came away with a 56-14 win over Idaho. I'm curious, just going to throw this editorial comment in here. I'm curious to see how Idaho plays this weekend when they go on the road to Oregon State, a Pac-12 team. I think you're going to look back at this win and say, actually, Indiana took care of, blew out, obliterated a decent FCS team. I expect Oregon State to win on Saturday, but I could see Idaho keep that one a lot closer this weekend. And of course, you look back to week 1, Iowa clearly looks like a much better team than we anticipated. Much better than I anticipated. I'll bite the bullet on that as Iowa went into Ames and defeated the Iowa State Cyclones over the weekend pretty comfortably. But let's talk about the Hoosiers. 56-14 win. The first quarter, Indiana did what they had to do. Jumped out aggressively, exciting plays made on all sides of the football. Stephen Carr, I guess he's the trivia question. He was the first home touchdown, first overall touchdown scored by Indiana this season. The next trivia question is, Jevan Swinton. He was the first player to catch a touchdown for Indiana in the 2021 football season, as he caught the 9-yard pass from Michael Penick Jr. And then, of course, Swinton, who missed the first game of the season against Iowa due to a team suspension, recovered a block punt and took it into the end zone. He scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Somebody that I know Tom Allen has indicated as somebody who is showing up repeatedly in practice as the 4th or 5th wide receiver. So to see him make plays not only in receiving but in special teams, very noteworthy. Jevan, as you look at the overall performances for Indiana on Saturday night, who are one or two players that stood out to you, whether it's offense or defense or special teams? I know it's hard to put a lot of stock into a 6-touchdown win, but talk to me about one or two guys that you thought really popped on the screen Saturday night.
Yeah. I think Stephen Carr for the team that Idaho is, I think he played really well. But what's even, I don't know if you want to look at it as a positive or a negative, he can be even better once this offensive line figures everything out. I know we saw Caleb Jones move from tackle to guard, which is something that we kind of wanted to see, some kind of just to mix things up from Iowa to Idaho. And Tom Allen maybe found something out. I think the real test is obviously going to be Saturday whenever we host Cincinnati. But Stephen Carr looked really good. He broke one off for, I think, 28 yards down the sideline late in the game to set up Indiana in the red zone. And I think that's when Freifogel caught his touchdown. I think that was that drive. He had a couple of runs of 15 plus yards. He looked like the explosive 4-star back from UFC, five-star 4-star from USC that transferred. So, which is something we didn't see in week 1. Granted, that Iowa defense looked phenomenal again in week 2. So maybe we can get that from Stephen Carr moving forward. Hopefully, it's going to be something that's very needed this weekend for sure. On the defensive side of the ball, I think this team got back to its nature of creating turnovers. Micah McFadden with the strip sack fumble to set up IU down deep in their own territory. Multiple 3-and-outs. You mentioned Jevan Swinton's touchdown. Literally 4 plays later was when he got the block because it was a 3-and-out that the defense forced. So that seemed to all happen very fast. So I would say, really the whole defense as a whole, Tom Allen spoke on it. They played really well. He thinks that they played really well for sure. And then I would say Stephen Carr on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I was watching the game on Saturday night, and 2 players on the defensive side of the ball really looked like they impacted the game, which is always what you want to see on defense. To me, those 2 guys were Ritter Anderson on the defensive line. Yes. Once again, the transfer from Ole Miss, somebody we've mentioned multiple times on this podcast, somebody who looks like he's got that SEC body, NFL body, and he's got, SEC and NFL level delivery on the field. He had 4 tackles, a tackle for loss in that game, and he's got to be a major pest in the backfield against Cincinnati on Saturday. The other guy was linebacker Cam Jones. I thought Cam Jones had a pretty good game, somebody I've always liked on this IU defense. He has that ability to make plays. He got a sack. He was constantly in the action all evening. Cam Jones, to me, is such a key player in this defense because now with Marcelino McCrary Ball back in the mix, you all of a sudden have those versatile linebackers coming off the edge who can stop the run, who can cover a tight end, who can cover a wide receiver over the middle. Having those multiple skill sets, so important in this day and age. So important, especially when you're facing a Cincinnati team that doesn't turn the ball over that much.
Yeah, and those 2 linebackers that you mentioned are linebackers that can play sideline to sideline. They're both very fast, finding the ball, attacking the ball. But someone else who played really well on defense, who gets a lot of pub throughout the whole season, and it's very, very well deserved, is Taiwan Mullen. I mean, he led the team in tackles as a defensive back. Usually you don't see that very, and he had 7 tackles, which is something that is I looked at the end of the game and I was almost like, wow, he had 7 tackles. It was just one of those things. But no, that's something that definitely needs to be mentioned as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the player on offense, by the way, it was just 7 solo tackles for Taiwan Mullen. Right. He chipped in on a couple others as well for 9 total in that game. The offensive in quotes player that I loved watching on Saturday night was DJ Matthews. Of course, his big play was on special teams, but of course, he's somebody who I look at very similar to Cam Jones or Ritter Anderson on the defensive side of the ball as far as that big play potential, that explosive play potential. You saw him do it on special teams Saturday night. You saw the whole variety of moves by Matthews on that punt return too. It wasn't he had, the Red Sea parting in front of him and he just sprinted in for a touchdown. No, he had to shake past the defender. I think he either spun or juked one or two guys. It was a real highlight reel type punt return. So I love seeing DJ Matthews on the field. I know he had a rough opener. I know a lot of IU fans remember him slipping out of his break, ball glancing off his hands, returned for a pick six by Riley Moss just in the first drive of that, or the second drive of that game in week one. But DJ Matthews has all the tools to be a showtime, show-stopping football player, and I love seeing him score that punt return touchdown. The question I wanted to talk to you about, Jevan, and for IU fans that didn't watch every minute of that game, how did Michael Penix Jr. look? You know, we were looking to see him bounce back after that 3 interception performance in week one. How did you evaluate Michael Penix Jr. in the home opener in Indiana win 56-14 over Idaho?
So the first half, he played extremely well. I think at halftime he was like 9 for 11. You can't look at the yards because the defense had them set up in great field position. The special teams had them set up in even better field position at times. So, and I think we had 4 kickoff / punt returns that went for over 45, 50 yards. So you can't really look at his yardage total and say, okay, he had 72 yards or whatever it was that he had, and say, oh, he couldn't have had a good game. He was efficient in the first half. I will say in his last drive, he overthrew, I think, 3 of his last 4 balls, and they weren't particularly close. When Penick gets rushed, he tends to overthrow his receiver. And that can't happen, especially in games coming up like against Cincinnati, and you look into the future against Ohio State, Wisconsin, and teams like that. But when you give him a clean pocket, he is very accurate, and he knows where to go with the ball. And I said this after the Iowa game. And against Iowa, it wasn't on the podcast. It was in one of my classes. We were talking about it. He had a very bad tendency against Iowa to stare one receiver down the whole time. And it gave the defensive backs an easy opportunity to just look at where he was going and jump on the route. Against Idaho, he did a lot better of a job of looking off receivers, looking off DBs, and even hitting a check down every now and then. And also we saw him, he got a little bit elusive on a couple of plays, which is always good to see coming off of an injury, that he still has that ability, and it's not in the back of his head, to not want to tuck it and run. Because he is a mobile quarterback. He did put on some weight, but he's still a mobile quarterback for sure. But I would give him a B-. He could definitely have played a lot better, but given the opportunities that he was had with the short field advantage, I think he played pretty well.
Yeah, Michael Penix Jr. finished 11 of 16 for 68 yards passing and 2 touchdowns through the air. He also chipped in with a rushing touchdown. Mm-hmm. And so overall, 3 scores for Michael Penix Jr. before Jack Tuttle took over midway through the second half or so. And as much as IU fans want to see the gaudy numbers, first of all, I mean, 3 touchdowns, not too shabby. Right, no turnovers, not too shabby. As much as I know IU fans want to see the gaudy Madden-like Showtime numbers, I even thought that's what Penix Jr. was going to do in my bold prediction on the podcast last week. The most important thing, Michael Penix is starting the next game. He's healthy. He's clean through 2 games. That's Indiana's biggest concern as far as their QB1. And now it's a big-time heavyweight quarterback superstar matchup with Michael Penix Jr. going up against Desmond Ritter of Cincinnati on Saturday. A couple other quick hit notes, Jevan. We don't have to spend too much time. Offensive line was concerning. There were back-to-back plays in the first half where Michael Penix was sacked. There was a switch, right? Caleb Jones, was kicked out to the other side at tackle. Matt Bedford slid into the right guard spot. Luke Haggard got the start like he was supposed to in week 1, but couldn't. Still, though, some questions as far as that offensive line is concerned.
Yeah, with that much change, nothing's going to help that offensive line more than just live reps. And I think that's almost what this game may have been used for, is just getting more reps and more reps and more reps, because at the end of the day, the more reps you have, the more consistent you're going to be. And I think that is almost what this game was used for.
I agree. I think it's one of those things where you sometimes just have to work through it. Idaho was an opponent where you could experiment with some things. I know Indiana for a fact, listening in 2 Zoom sessions with Tom Allen and with Nick Sheridan, I know the Hoosiers are working to improve up front. They know how important it is to have Michael Penix upright, and especially how important it is to give him time to really launch that ball down the field. A.J. Barner, Jevan, he had the longest touchdown of the night for Indiana on Saturday. It looks like the Hoosiers I know for a fact Indiana's been looking for a second tight end to step up behind Peyton Hendershot. It looks like AJ Barner could be that guy.
Yeah, not only the 70-plus yard touchdown he had, but he also blocked a punt directly afterwards. So he's very versatile. But yeah, and he showed some elusiveness too on that touchdown. Granted, he's pretty open when he caught it, but he broke a tackle, spun off, and did the rest. Took off 40-yard dash all the way to the end zone. So that was definitely something very good to see.
Yeah, that's about a wrap for our Indiana-Idaho recap. The Hoosiers jumping out to a big lead in the first quarter, 21-0 after the first 15 minutes, and they go on to win 56-14 against the Vandals. The Hoosiers now 1-1 on the season. It was the first 56-point performance since they hung that crooked number on Purdue back in 2013. When I initially saw the stat, I was thinking, was it Eastern Illinois? Was it Rutgers? Was it Florida International or Ball State? No. It was Purdue, 56-36, about 6 or 7 years ago. So funny to see that little note come through. But now all the focus heads to Cincinnati. We're going to talk about the massive matchup between the Hoosiers and the number 8 Bearcats in just a moment. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU Sports, where we look beyond men's basketball or football to talk about a rising star outside in those Olympic sports at Indiana University, if we can find them. And there were definitely a lot of candidates this week, but I wanted to tip my cap to Paige Weber, the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week in the women's soccer sport. She had a hat trick in Indiana's win over Murray State back on Thursday night. She was the 6th player in program history to record a hat trick. So it's great to see Paige Weber pick up that accomplishment. The Hoosiers started 6-1-1. It's their best start since 2013. You also can tip your cap to Jamie Gerstenberg, who is the Big Ten Freshman of the Week. She had a clean sheet, and she's in fact had 3 straight clean sheets to help contribute to Indiana soccer's fast start. If you would like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you enjoy our show, and this is important, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. That kind of support is what really helps grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. So, Jevan, I'm going to do the Bill Belichick line. We've got to do the Bill Belichick line. Okay, and maybe we'll be more creative next year when Indiana travels to Nippert Stadium in Ohio, but we're on to Cincinnati. We're on to Cincinnati, Jevan. We're on to Cincinnati. It's the last time I'm going to say it. I know a lot of IU fans also are fans of the Colts. I know, Jevan, you are as well, so no more Bill Belichick references. The Hoosiers take on the number 8 Bearcats Saturday afternoon at noon Eastern at Memorial Stadium. It's supposed to be a hot one, by the way. Temperatures in the high 80s. We'll see exactly what it is at game time on Saturday afternoon. The sun's going to be out. It's going to be a summery type afternoon at Memorial Stadium. The game will be telecast on ESPN. Okay, there was a little indecision on ESPN's part, what platform, what channel to put it on. Confirmed, the main ESPN channel on Saturday afternoon. Dave Pasch, Tom Luganbill, and Dusty Dvoracek will be on the call. Cincinnati, as things stand, the Bearcats are a 3.5-point favorite. The over-under in the contest is 50.5. If you do the math, they're expecting a final score of something like 27-24, 28-24 in favor of the Bearcats. Lots of interesting names and numbers on the Cincinnati squad. I mentioned they were 8th in the AP poll. A couple of AP writers had them as high as 4th. David Jablonski and Tom Murphy. Jablonski covers college football from the city of Dayton in Ohio, so he's got a closer look at the Bearcats. Tom Murphy, he's down in Arkansas, but he even thought Cincinnati was top 4 team in college football right now. Cincinnati's 10th in S&P Plus per ESPN.com, the 23rd rated offense in the country, the 8th defense. Indiana's 46th overall in that same rating system, 58th offense, 37th defense. Cincinnati was picked to finish first in the preseason AP poll after a 9-1 season last year. They took 22 out of the 24 first place votes in that preseason poll, with UCF getting the other 2. Before we dive into the key players on this Bearcats team, Jevan, talk to us a little bit about Cincinnati, high level. What are you expecting out of Indiana? What are you hearing from the team? What are you looking specifically from the Hoosiers going into this game on Saturday?
What needs to happen Saturday, Mike Penix needs to play A+ football. I know I mentioned against Idaho, he played in the B range. They can't be any of that. I feel like there are a few things that need to happen for Indiana to win this game, and we'll get into a couple of them a little bit later. But I think number one, Penix has to play A+ football. This Cincinnati team is too good to have any mental lapses, especially like the ones he did against Idaho or against Iowa. Even Idaho in the second half where he was overthrowing people. I think clean pocket for Penix. So I guess this also flows down to the offensive line. Hopefully through the game against Idaho and this week of practice, they can get some of those things figured out. Clean pocket for Penix equals Indiana success against, doesn't matter who you put him against. That's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's a clear way of putting it. Michael Penix Jr. has to be really, really good. And he's got to be great. Good only gets you so far in college. He's got to be great against Cincinnati Bearcats. No question about it. The Bearcats have Luke Fickell as their head coach, former Ohio State head man. He has guided Cincinnati to a 23-4 record over the last 3 years since the start of 2019. The Bearcats have won 21 out of their last 24 games. In the start of the it's not bad. And they've been ranked. They've been ranked in 31 straight AP polls, I believe, in that top 25. And that started the 2019 season, just to zoom out a little bit. Cincinnati started with a 10-point home win over UCLA and Chip Kelly. In week 2, they fell at Ohio State 42-0, a game where a lot of people wrote Cincinnati off after it finished, saying this Bearcats team, not great, waste of time, not a real major group of 5 contender. But then they really picked up steam after that game, stringing together something like 6 or 7 wins in a row before dropping back-to-back games against Memphis. And what's interesting is, they also knocked off UCF at home. They won at Houston. And then last year continued that success as far as winning every one of their 9 regular season games. And it's funny, I mentioned how Cincinnati has won 23 out of 27 games since the start of 2019. I was most impressed with how they played in one of those losses, the Peach Bowl against Georgia in 2020, where they hung in there until the very end of the game, although they dropped that Peach Bowl contest 24-21 at the hands of the Bulldogs. We're going to get to the key players in just a moment, but first, shout out to Matt Lukens, who's joining our podcast here after his food delay. It's something you won't see at a baseball game. Usually they stop things for rain or maybe some lightning. Here we have issues when it comes to food delay. Matt, how are you doing on this Tuesday night? Do you have any closing thoughts on Indiana's win over Idaho? No is a perfectly acceptable answer.
I do have a couple closing thoughts, and that is I found the changes they made with the offensive line were a little bit interesting to me. I didn't think they really worked either, because I thought that Idaho still got pressure on Penick, and that should have never been the case when you're playing Idaho. Sure, 1 or 2 QB pressures, you're allowed to make mistakes, but there was just maybe 4 or 5 too many people back in the backfield pressuring Penick that game. So huge question marks about the offensive line going into the Cincinnati game. I thought special teams looked great against Idaho. Now that's Idaho, so we can take it with a grain of salt. I like to see how they perform next week, but that's a nice change in direction from how special teams played during the Iowa game 2 weeks ago. So
yeah,
that's it.
Absolutely. And it's nice to have sort of that palate cleansing type of win where all 3 phases of the football deliver. Indiana, of course, won by 6 touchdowns last year. You didn't have a cupcake on your schedule because it was all Big Ten teams and you couldn't play Purdue. So that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Cupcakes.
It's a little rough. After all, 2021 Purdue looks a lot different, I'll tell you that much.
True.
But we're going to save that for our preview 8 weeks from now or whatever it is. But to get back to Cincinnati, head coach Luke Fickell, 2020 American Athletic Conference Coach of the Year, someone who apparently is a leading candidate for the newly opened USC job. Otherwise, the players that you need to know: quarterback Desmond Ritter, superstar QB, even though he plays at a group of 5 school at Cincinnati, superstar QB, NFL aspiration, super tall quarterback, 6'4", but extremely mobile. And it's something that Marcelino Ball mentioned when he was speaking to the media on Monday. Very strange combination. You rarely see a 6'4" quarterback who can run the way Desmond Ritter runs. Defensive back Ahmad Gardner is a name you need to know. Superstar corner. First team preseason All-American. He's going to be lined up almost definitely against Ty Freifogel all afternoon. A highly regarded corner who is a top 60 NFL projection as far as his draft picks concerned, but they have a number of other notable players as well. Gardner's fellow defensive back, Coby Bryant, Coby, major player on the opposite side of the field as Gardner. He actually had an interception of JT Daniels in the Peach Bowl last season in that 3-point Cincinnati loss. Running back Jordan Ford is an Alabama transfer who's a starter in the backfield for Cincinnati. He's got 4 touchdowns and 200-yard games. That is 2 100-plus yard rushing games in those first 2 games Cincinnati has played this year. Michael Young is a wide receiver. You need to know he's come in as a Notre Dame transfer. On the defensive side of the ball, Maijai Sanders is a force on the defensive line, someone that the offensive line for Indiana has to focus on keeping out of the backfield as much as possible. I like defensive lineman Marcus Brown as well. He's somebody that's really popped in Cincinnati's first 2 games. Linebacker Darian Beavers is solid as well. And in the special teams department, kick returner Trey Tucker was a second-team All-American Conference player after his kick return touchdown, notably against South Florida last season. A handful of departures for Cincinnati. Offensive tackle James Hudson was taken in the 4th round by the Cleveland Browns. Running back Jared Dokes out of Lawrence Central was taken by Miami in the 7th round. Linebacker Jarrell White, safety James Wiggins, defensive lineman Elijah Ponder all moved on as well. Safety Derek Forrest was a 5th round pick by the Washington football team. Punter James Smith is gone as well. So Cincinnati had to make a transition there. Matt, as you look at the matchup off the top, what are a couple of key matchups that you need to see IU win? What are a couple of matchups that you've got circled as you head into this massive game on Saturday afternoon?
I mean, obviously the corners against our wide receivers is huge. Again, Penick hasn't found a lot of success really passing the ball this year. I don't think that's going to really change all that much against Cincinnati with the matchups that we have. Ty Freifogel's got to show why he's an NFL wide receiver going up against somebody that's going to be an NFL corner. And then, like you said, Cincinnati's defensive line, they are no joke. Like for a Power 5 school, they might have the best defensive line I've seen from that, portion of college football. And so IU's going to have their hands full, and it's just going to be the start of things to come for the Big Ten, because it's not like you're going up against a lot of Idaho-style defensive lines out here. You got Penn State, you got Ohio State, you got Michigan State. There's some really good defensive lines out there that IU's going to have to play against. The offensive line is definitely going to have to keep Penick upright and give him enough time to find those slim openings that are going to exist with our wide receivers on those really good corners from Cincy.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. Cincinnati, even though they are in the American Athletic Conference, for all intents and purposes, they're a Big Ten football team this year. I know they're in the same geographic area. Frankly, they're the best football team in Ohio, if you ask me, after what happened on Saturday afternoon at the Shoe. So, the rankings play that out. And frankly, if you ask me, I think if Cincinnati and Ohio State played each other, it would come down to the wire. So the Bearcats, I really like the point you made. Wide receivers for Indiana against the corners at Cincinnati. By the way, Gardner, he wears number 1 for the Bearcats, so he'll be easy to pick out. Coby Bryant, the other notable corner for Cincinnati, he wears number 7, so you'll be able to notice him as well. As far as wide receivers versus corners are concerned, I'm looking forward to seeing that slot matchup where Indiana could very well have an advantage with DJ Matthews going up against Anquan Bush. It could be an area where Indiana really takes advantage of that Florida straight transfer who has come in. Of course, Indiana's already faced a really strong secondary against Iowa, and that really struggled. Jevan, how about another matchup Indiana fans should circle? We know that the wide receivers versus the corners are really important as far as Indiana's offense versus Cincinnati's defense. What's one other that you're curious to see play out on Saturday?
Well, I just want to welcome everybody to the Hoosier Sound, where Matt and Jevan just take each other's ideas every single time we're on the same podcast together. It's a weekly thing almost at this point whenever we're on the same episode. I
Sorry,
like
Jevan.
the receivers versus corners, just like you guys, but I also want to see how Nick Sheridan approaches even attacking Ahmad Gardner. Like that is something when we looked at the Google Doc before, it's the first thing that popped in my mind. Yes, the receiver, yes, Ty Freifogel versus Ahmad Gardner is going to be something, but how does Nick Sheridan even attack that? Does he completely take Freifogel out of the game and just stay away from Gardner? Do they move Freifogel around? Does Gardner follow him? That's definitely something that I am going to be watching, and how Penick performs against this arsenal of defensive backs that Cincinnati has. Like we mentioned, against Iowa, didn't look the best by any form of grading. Against Idaho, didn't look the best again, but didn't look as bad against Iowa, which thank God he didn't look that bad again. But no, that is what I'm going to look forward to, is Sheridan versus Gardner, Sheridan versus these defensive backs.
Yeah, on the defensive side of the ball, one thing I'm looking at for IU to do is really shut down that Cincinnati passing game. You know, we've talked about a lot of the players on the Bearcats, but one thing we really haven't mentioned is those wide receivers. Yeah, Michael Young, Alabama transfer, he is their leading receiver on the season, and he's coming off a pretty good game against Murray State. But by and large, this Cincinnati passing game against the Indiana secondary should be a massive advantage in the favor of the Hoosiers. Now, we saw Hayden Hatton of Idaho put up 100 receiving yards and scoring twice against the Indiana secondary, but you didn't have Jalen Williams, you didn't have Devon Matthews. If those two players return, and they're questionable, we're not 100% sure yet, but right, the NFL, when you're saying questionable, are you closer to out or are you closer to playing? I think Devon Matthews and Jalen Williams are closer to playing than closer to sitting on Saturday. So we'll see how it all plays out officially. That's just my guess, my prediction here based on what I've heard as far as this Tuesday night's concerned. But, I look at the Cincinnati passing game, and while Desmond Ritter has completed 72% of his passes this season, and he's thrown for 6 touchdowns and 1 interception, both of those games have been against subpar opposition. You're talking about Miami, Ohio out of the MAC, as well as Murray State out of the FCS. This is a major elevation and degree of difficulty for the Cincinnati offense. So, and not while we all look at it from the Indiana perspective, saying that the Bearcats are really good, it's actually Cincinnati just as much. He says, wow, this is a much, much tougher team that we're facing compared to what we did our first 2 games. And then, by the way, the Bearcats head to South Bend to take on Notre Dame a week from Saturday. So an interesting road trip, to say the least, for the Bearcats. I'm curious to see how that matchup plays out, to say the least. By the way, another Cincinnati receiver, Tyler Scott, he's their statistical leading receiver right now with 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had an Indiana offer and chose to play for the Bearcats, so there's a little bit of revenge as far as that's concerned. Matt and Jevan, I know Indiana impressed in all 3 phases of the game as far as making plays against Idaho. Matt, I'm going to ask you this first. When you look at the offense, the defense, and the special teams, which phase needs to deliver and be at its best on Saturday for IU to come away with a top 10 victory?
Well, I would normally say the defense, but we kind of saw that, didn't we, against Iowa? The defense was not bad. The defense played, I thought, extremely well against Iowa. And you saw what Iowa did to Iowa State. That's another defense that was supposed to be very good. And they did that on the road against them, right, in a hostile environment, a rivalry game. So I think the defense has been fine. So I would have to say the offense at this point, I mean, clearly, we haven't seen the offense play well at all, in my opinion. I don't think they played great against Idaho. They just played Idaho, right? Like at a certain point, there's just going to be a talent, a trench, right? A gap, just a huge difference between the talent. Chasm, yes. Yeah. All the words, all the vocabulary words. You can input your own in the chat below, but there's just a gap between Idaho and IU, and that's no offense to Idaho, but Idaho's not getting former 5-star recruits to come in and play running back and transfer in from USC. So there's just a difference, and so IU has to go out and their offense has to prove it against somebody who the entire national media is absolutely in love with in Cincinnati. Like they think Fickle is the next coming of Saban, and that their offense is going to score 40 points and they're going to be the first team Power 5 school to make the college football playoff. And that might be the case, though. Are they really a Power 5 school if they're starting to have the Big 12 logos everywhere? They're just the Big 12 commissioners like rooting for them to make it into the over Texas or Oklahoma this year. I think it's the weirdest situation. But anyways, the offense has to show up. They really do. It is extremely important that the offense shows up on Saturday and plays its best game of the season. Otherwise, we have no shot.
Jevan, same question to you. When you look at the three phases of the game, which phase needs to be at its best for IU to knock off number 8 Cincinnati?
Defense wins championships, and defense is what's going to win us this game against Cincinnati. I believe that, look, even if the offense plays poorly, if the defense plays the best game of the year, that the best game they can possibly play, the defense does, then the offense doesn't have to be great. The offense can be good enough and still get the job done. So I think, we saw it this last weekend with Micah McFadden forcing the strip fumble. I think the big stat at the end of this game, for me, whoever wins the turnover battle is who's going to win this game. So take that for what you want. If the offense has to play well enough to not turn the ball over, or the defense has to play well enough to create more turnovers in Cincinnati, whoever is leading the turnover battle when the clock says 0 is going to have a higher score at the end of this game.
I love that. No votes for special teams. Look, all I'm saying is, this is probably going to be a close game. Okay, this is probably going to be a game that comes down to the wire where, look, you're going to have to make some impact plays in the third phase. And the one guy who's yet to have really his big YouTube moment, his big Sports Center moment, is Charlie Campbell. Okay, I can definitely envision this game being one where Cincinnati's new kicker, new punter struggle a little bit, and Indiana has to get it down to the 30-yard line, 35-yard line, and Charlie Campbell comes on and has to hit a 50-yard field goal in a key moment to win this game for Indiana. So when you think about Campbell, somebody who's looking for a superstar moment, I know offense and defense are by and large much more important. But when I really think about this game in detail, I see one where if a team in this game blocks a punt or makes a big play in the return game or screws something up as far as missing a short field goal or botching an extra point, that can make all the difference in the world. And bold, like I said, bold prediction, I think Charlie Campbell's going to hit a game-winning kick late in this contest.
You're not out here actually telling me that you believe that the special teams is the difference between us winning and losing this football game.
I think it's an advantage for Indiana going into this matchup. And when I look at IU's offense for Cincinnati defense, I think Cincinnati's defense has a bit of an advantage. When I look at Cincinnati's offense versus IU's defense, I think IU's defense has a little bit of an advantage as well. I think special teams could decide it, and Indiana really impressed, and KCT Garden has done a really good job on that side of the ball.
The offense, the last time we played a good team, only scored 6 points and threw like 3 picks, and had a bunch of
but you have to think one of those picks that resulted in 7 points should not have happened.
Yeah, fair.
Penick can't look at one receiver the whole time on the second receiver and not expect a DB of that caliber that Iowa has to not pick that ball off. He has to look off defenders. The third one, we can blame Penick for really bad and the second one, the receiver ran the wrong route. So that's just, with reps, you get better with those things. I don't know. I stand by my defensive pick, and whoever has the most turnovers at the end of this game is going to be the one that loses the game.
Well, I can tell you're right about the turnovers part, but it's part about the offense not turning the ball over.
Yeah, you can look at it. You can look at it both ways for sure.
It's the question over on the Hoosier Sound Twitter account. The exact question we just talked about for the last 3-4 minutes. Which phase needs to be at its best? And the majority of people do agree with Matt Lukens, and 78% of them say the offense needs to be clicking for Indiana to beat the Bearcats. The defense got only 15% of the vote. Special teams got 6%. I'm siding with with those of you, those 6%. You guys understand we're on the same wavelength. Those 7% and me, we know it's going to be a close game, and there's going to be one or two massive plays in that special teams department where KCT Garden is going to be taking some credit post game.
Here, how about this? Let me set up a scenario. All right. We're down by 2. Defense has to get a big stop, so the defense is important. Offense has to move the ball down the field, so the offense is important. And then Chuck Campbell comes in and hits a 50-yard field goal, so the special teams wins us the game.
Okay, all right, fair. Honestly, we just have to play well. And honestly, like we're all talking about, it's going to be a close game. It's going to be a close game. The last time I said it's going to be a close game, we got our butts handed to us in Iowa City. So I'm not going to say it's a close game. I'm just going to say this is a must win. We got to win this game. Like, if we have hopes for this season like we did before, and look, Iowa might end up winning the Big Ten for Pete's sake. Like the way they're playing right now, the way they look, the way that the rest of the conference looks, like they definitely look by far the best team, most solid team. So if we want to like get back into this, maybe even make a trip to Indianapolis at the end of the year, like we're going to have to win this game. Like this is going to have to be the turning around. Put your flag in the ground. This is the moment in which things change for the season moment. So we got to win this game. This is a must win. It's not going to be a close game. It's not going to be high scoring or what. It doesn't matter what it is. We just have to win this football game.
And it helps that Indiana's going to be at home, and it looks like the weather's going to cooperate. Nothing crazy or unusual there besides being a little bit warm on the warm side. So, hey, if you're going to play an important game, you'd like to have it in front of your home crowd that has to step up, much like the Penick Stadium crowd stepped up 2 weeks ago. I'm going to ask both of you which IU players you need to see step up for the Hoosiers to win in just a moment. But first, it's time for our social media shout out. Real quick, last week, once the Indiana basketball schedule was released for the 21-22 season, Jevan and I hopped on and recorded a rapid reaction video over on the Indiana HQ YouTube page. Head over there. Make sure you like it. Make sure you subscribe. We're going to have post-game press conference video up for football games, for men's basketball games on that YouTube channel. It's going to be exclusively on YouTube. You're not going to find it anywhere else. So if you want to know more about the 21-22 men's basketball schedule, as well as see more post-game content, head over to the Indiana HQ YouTube channel and like the videos you see on there and subscribe to that channel. So Jevan, let's head back to the Cincinnati game coming up on Saturday. The Hoosiers take on number 8 Cincinnati at Memorial Stadium on Saturday at noon. Talk to me about one or two Indiana players that need to be in player of the game conversations for the Hoosiers to come out on top.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of go against what I just said when I say the defense has to play extremely well to win this game. But I also said this earlier in the podcast before Matt got here. Penick has to play A+ football. That we can't have the B- B range that I talked about against Idaho. This has to be his best game so far this year. And like Matt said, this is a must-win situation. With Ohio State losing last week to Oregon, this is a must-win game. That way, when Ohio State comes to Bloomington, we can hopefully do what we have to do with them. And for that to happen, Penick has to play A+ football. And an extension of that is the offensive line, right? Like the offensive line has to give him time so he can use the time that they give him and play A+ football. So Michael Penick Jr. is the person that needs to step up.
And hey, it looks like Forrest Gray in the live chat is along the same lines as you, Jevan, shouting out the offensive line as the player or the unit that needs to step up for Indiana to win. Matt, same question for you. Who's the one or two players that you want to see on the Indiana football team have a great game on Saturday to lead the Hoosiers to victory?
So Jevan again steals my answers every time he comes on. I think Penick was by far, that was the toss up easy. But it's true, but like legitimately, not to disrespect Jevan's take at all. Like that is, he's the best player on our team. He has to play like that. And he hasn't so far this year. So he needs to show up. So my two, one, he doesn't have to be the player of the game. I'm not even asking him to have a B+ game. I'm asking him a B-, and that's Caleb Jones. All right. Who has had a really rough start to the year. He had a awful Iowa game. Awful. And he didn't look that great last week either against Idaho. So hopefully third time's the charm. He plays somewhat decently on a Saturday. And we get out with a win. Because if he plays up to his talent, like his physical build, his talent, like he's built differently, right? Like he's built like an NFL offensive lineman. If he can somehow figure out what has been going wrong in the first 2 weeks and play up to snuff, now we're going to be looking at having a decent offensive line. I'm not saying the entire offensive line issues are down to Caleb Jones. However, he is probably the biggest contributor to those issues. So I would like to see a good game out of him. Shout out to the guy in chat, by the way, that said the offensive line, because he's right. The whole unit themselves has to have a good game. And the second thing for me, look, we haven't really seen a lot of Miles Marshall. We talked a lot about him going into this week, but look, it's asking a lot for Ty Freifogel to have a huge game. We're going to need him to be impactful, sure, but he's going up against one of the best corners in the country, so he's going to have some snaps where, look, he's just going to be covered. Like, good defense just wins, right? Sometimes, and in NBA, right, it's like good offense wins, but in football, it's like good defense can sometimes just be just good defense. You just put it up there and go, all right, that guy just made a play. And so Ty Freifogel was not going to get targeted as much as he would like probably this game. And so somebody's going to have to step up from that receiver unit. For me, that's Miles Marshall working on that second corner. Again, he's a really good corner as well. Cincinnati's loaded at that position, but he's just going to have to step up and play a really big game and just show up prime time, 12 o'clock. Yeah. Show up. This is the biggest game of the season.
That's it. And, and for me, along those lines, I'm curious to see how Ahmad Gardner and Kobe Bryant match up against Indiana's receivers. If it goes how I'm expecting it, I'm looking for DJ Matthews and Peyton Hendershot to take advantage of their mismatches. We haven't talked much about Peyton Hendershot this season. He had a decent game in week 1 against Iowa. And Indiana's offensive coordinator, Nick Sheridan, made it clear that the tight end needs to get more involved in the passing game during Monday's media availability. Bold prediction, Peyton Hendershot's going to score a touchdown. You heard it here first. On the defensive side of the ball, Cincinnati's done a really good job at pounding the rock through the first 2 games. And the thing is, if it goes as I'm expecting it to go, where Indiana's corners win their matchup against Cincinnati's receivers, well, Cincinnati's going to try to expose Indiana's defense by running it through their quarterback and their running back. And that's where Indiana's girth up front, right? Guys like CO, guys like Ryder Anderson, who have affected both the run and the pass game, linebackers like Micah McFadden or Marcelino Ball. They're going to have to do a good job to contain Cincinnati to under 4.2 yards a carry and really force Cincinnati as much as possible to become one-dimensional in more passing than running situations. Indiana fell behind so quickly against Iowa that they weren't able to really put Iowa's offense into compromised situations. That's going to be a big deal when it comes to this game on Saturday. I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out. As we wind down on this Tuesday night, Jevan, I'm going to throw it over to you first. Any closing thoughts on the Cincinnati matchup before we head into our Big Ten predictions this week?
It's going to be a great atmosphere yet again this week. It will be a better atmosphere than we saw last week. The stadium will be packed earlier than it was. The lots will be full for tailgating. It's going to be an ESPN game at noon. It's going to be a great atmosphere, great experience overall. I'm looking for Indiana to come in and usually you say steal a game on the road, but maybe steal a game at home. I'm looking for Indiana to come in, play extremely well on the defensive side of the ball, let the defensive side of the ball take control of this game, not let Cincinnati's run game run all over them, hopefully not let the passing game get any kind of momentum whatsoever. And the defense to just shut this game down and let the offense slowly but surely, wind the clock down on the offensive side of the ball.
Matt, how about you? As you look at this matchup, what are your final thoughts as Indiana takes on number 8 Cincinnati Saturday, a game where Indiana HQ will be represented by Jevan and I at Memorial Stadium?
Well, all 3 of us will be there. I have a ticket.
Look at that.
Yeah. We'll all be there, but I'll be in the stands drinking a beer, hopefully not crying myself to sleep that night. But like I said, this game's a must win. We got to win this game. IU is backed themselves into this corner, I guess, by their performance against Iowa. I think this wouldn't even be a must win if we didn't get beat as badly in Iowa. If we had made that a close game, then you go and see them beat Iowa State the next week. I think we go, okay, like we didn't win the game. There's no such thing as moral victories, but no, look, we gave them a close game. Look what they did to Iowa State, who's a preseason top 10 team, right? And the way we performed, we have to show out. We have not only just keep this close, like Nithin said, this could be a close game. We got to win this game. This season relies on that. If we have aspirations to go to the Rose Bowl, maybe even make some noise in the college football playoff rankings, like this team has the talent to do so. They just have to figure it out somehow. And that's on offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan, really, honestly, because again, as we know, Tom Allen doesn't really have his hands all over the offense. He kind of leaves that to the coordinators on that side of the ball because it's not his specialty. And honestly, that's one of the things I think that makes Tom Allen really cool as a head coach. And a lot of head coaches will go around and they want to put their fingerprints on every single side of the ball and everything they do, but he knows what he does best and he knows what he doesn't do well. And that's really cool thing about him. So look, if Nick Sheridan wants to have a contract next year and a spot and a job, like he's got to show you why we're paying him so much money in this game this weekend.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be fireworks necessarily, not by any means. It's just got to be smart, sensible, understanding of what Cincinnati's defense is doing, putting his players in the best spot to succeed. I know it's a lot easier said than done, but Nick Sheridan, someone that I know all Hoosier fans have an eye on. As far as I'm concerned, I love the atmosphere that I saw on Saturday night last week, and I need to see an even bigger atmosphere at Memorial Stadium on Saturday afternoon. I know Hoosier fans who watched that first game against Iowa. The crowd made a difference at Penick Stadium. Matt was there. He's talked about it on this podcast before. The Hawkeye fans gave their team an extra, 7, 10, 14 points.
Yeah.
Indiana fans have to do the same. They've got to create false starts on that Cincinnati offense. They've got to create delay of games. They've got to force that Cincinnati offense to burn timeouts. They have to perhaps create some blown coverages, some miscommunication on the Cincinnati defensive side of the ball and steal some free points for the Hoosiers. So I've got my eyes squarely fixated on the crowd, on the atmosphere at Memorial Stadium on Saturday afternoon. Really looking forward to seeing this big time matchup in person. I'll be at Memorial Stadium, as will the other two on this podcast. Super excited to soak it all in. It's time for Big Ten picks of the week this week. And wow, I saw last week's games. I was a little cocky thinking Buffalo's going to upset Nebraska. That didn't happen. But Matt had the spread pick right as far as the Iowa State-Iowa game was concerned. Matt took the Hawkeyes. I took the Cyclones. It was Iowa who came away with a big win. Jevan, I'm going to toss it over to you first. Lots of interesting games on this week 3 slate. Pick one Big Ten matchup against the spread and pick an upset for Hoosier Nation to watch out for going into Saturday.
Against the spread, I'm going to take Notre Dame to cover against Purdue.
Wow, that's
-6.
Interesting. Okay.
I know you talked a little earlier about how impressive this Purdue team looks compared to the years prior, but I just think Notre Dame coming off of a close game to Toledo, they know what needs to be fixed, and I just have enough faith in Notre Dame to come out and perform against a Purdue team. An upset, I'll go ahead and take it. IU over Cincy. I'll take it.
All right. Okay. All right. Jevan's confident enough. And again,
confident enough, but I just feel like we like you mentioned the game against Iowa, the crowd made such a difference. And based off of what I saw last Saturday night at 7:30, the Rock was packed. And I just feel like I saw a tweet earlier this week where a student said that he was going to be there at 4 a.m. in line to get a front row seat. Like I've never seen something like that when it comes to Indiana football. Maybe Indiana basketball, but not football. So I just think that the energy is going to be unmatched. I think it's going to be loud, electric, all of the above, and I think it's going to make a big difference. And I think IU's going to come away with a win.
There you go. So Jevan's picks both in the state of Indiana. Notre Dame to cover 6 points at home against Purdue, and Indiana to pull off the upset. Matt, how about you? Lots of big non-conference matchups on the slate. There is a conference game back on the radar this weekend. Maryland heads to Illinois on Friday night. All the different games you look at, Matt, what's one spread pick you like and one upset special?
Yeah, so I like Penn State to cover against Auburn. They play Auburn. Auburn's undefeated. Penn State is undefeated. That's a big game on Saturday.
Yep.
I think Auburn's a little bit of they haven't played anybody really, in my opinion. So this will be the first team that they really played. And I think Penn State's pretty good. So I like Penn State to win that by more than 6. And then honestly, I'm going the opposite of Jevan here. And that is I have lost all faith in Notre Dame. Complete faith in them. I had like a 19 parlay last week for college football. 8 of them hit, and it was Notre Dame not covering against Toledo. So Notre Dame is dead to me. So I have Purdue covering against Notre Dame and even upsetting Notre Dame this weekend. I hate to root for Purdue, but I think Notre Dame, I don't know. They're dead to me. So
can we talk really quick? David Bell is just insane at the sport of football.
Can you imagine if he was an IU wide receiver?
Because
it was IU Purdue.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Final 2.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
That'd
I played
nice.
him my senior year of basketball. He was also the star for their basketball team, and
for Warren Central, right?
Yeah. They were undefeated his senior year in basketball and football. And he had like 30 on us in the regional championship game, and then that was like 2 months after he won state and caught like 40 touchdowns in a season.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. Just absurd.
Yeah.
I've got Colorado covering 2.5 at home against Minnesota. It's a Colorado team that I know is going to be a little bit emotionally let down after almost knocking off Texas A&M last week, but I think there's still a little bit too much respect given to the Gophers after they lost Mo Ibrahim for the season. As far as my upset pick, I think there are going to be a lot of interesting games on Saturday. I'm going to take Michigan State to walk into Miami and come out with the win on Saturday afternoon. The game that's taking place at the same time as Indiana versus Cincinnati. So you can flip back and forth if you're an IU fan watching at home. Indiana, Cincinnati on ESPN. Michigan State at Miami on ABC. Miami's currently a 6.5-point favorite. I think Michigan State's got a different swagger about them this year. They're feeling a lot more confident. And I also think Miami's overrated. So I think you've got two things working in tandem as far as this Saturday game's concerned.
Is there a prop bet for another cat showing up at the Miami football game this weekend? Can we add that to our bet?
I mean, the three of us need to keep our eyes peeled at Memorial Stadium that no cats or live Bearcats show up on the field in Bloomington, Indiana, or else there will be problems. Real quick, round the horn before we wrap up tonight, just a prediction for this Indiana-Cincinnati game. Jevan, you said you felt like IU was going to win. Who wins and by how much?
IU 24-17.
Matt, how about you?
24-21.
Who wins, Matt?
IU. I thought that was would Indiana. I'm not about to sit here and say this is a bust to win and then be like,
I know. I'm just messing around. Look, I told you Charlie Campbell was going to be MVP of this game. I think it's going to be more low scoring. I got 2017 Indiana, 2017 Hoosiers. They get the win. It's not in the lopsided fashion that Iowa beat Indiana in back in week 1, but hey, all three of us have Indiana coming out on top, which means congrats to Cincinnati.
So what would be more impressive, an Iowa win over Indiana or an Indiana win over Cincinnati?
I mean, the way Iowa did it, that was really impressive, and then they followed it up. So
yeah, I mean, like in a bubble, it's our win over Cincinnati. But if you add in the fact that they went to Iowa State and then beat them afterwards, and the way in which they beat us, then that context means that their win over us is better.
And hey, Indiana is going to feel awfully good if they knock off Cincinnati, and then Cincinnati follows it up by going into South Bend and winning the in the game against Notre Dame after. So many things to keep in mind as far as this college football season is concerned. I know that week 1 loss to Iowa is demoralizing, but it's a 12-game season, probably a 13-game season. It's a lot of twists and turns in it. So buckle up. But that about wraps it up for our 217th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You are all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you